In 2015, the state of Maryland made sprinkler systems mandatory for every single-family home. At that time, then Council President Robert Hodge voted against including that requirement in Cecil County building codes, even though it was mandated by the state, in an attempt to stand up to state mandates that infringe on the individual county's rights. Mr. Larson, we'll start with you. If elected, would you introduce or support local legislation that runs contrary to unfair or unconstitutional state mandates, or would you fully comply and hope that the mandate gets changed by the usual legislative process down in Annapolis?
Wow. No. I think an intrusion of our rights on all levels, state, federal, local. There are things that fit the bill. There's a reason for some of those legislations. There's a reason for some of those building codes in different parts of the country. The sprinkler mandate, I'm not at all in favor of that. It adds huge expense to the house. Just to build a $200,000 home doesn't cost $200,000 anymore. It costs probably more like $250,000. I saw today California is now mandating in 2020 that all new homes must have solar arrays on there to offset the electrical consumption out there, and that's going to add, on average $10,000 to $25,000 per home. So I would not be in favor of anything that didn't clearly fit, round peg in round hole. If you understand where I'm coming from. So there doesn't need to be every mandate doesn't need to be enforced at the county level. So no, short answer, no, I would not enforce those. I would look for opportunities to work around them.
Okay. Mr. Seckenberg.
Okay, as far as the sprinkler mandate, it is state law. It's been actually challenged 3 or 4 times and withstood any kind of changes that would have happened in Annapolis. The county had to adopt it. We have to adopt state law in our building codes. I do remember when Councilman Hodge voted, and he basically was voting, well, I can't really change it, but I'm going to vote against it. I personally don't like the bill, and it never really did, but honestly, when you look at sprinklers, they are a life safety issue, and the volunteer fire companies have been very supportive of sprinklers. They look at it as a public safety issue for themselves, so they don't have major smoke inhalation, which leads to illnesses for them or potentially death. What I don't like is in the single-family home, where we have a lot of rural opportunities here in Cecil County, a sprinkler tank on a well and a septic, it adds additional costs. We've seen it in our residential home market. It's been enough where somebody's going to say, hey, I can't afford to do this. So I think there should have been some moderation in the choice. If it's a single-family home, if the insurer agrees that this is a good investment. We've even heard from insurers that say, hey, that's great, fires don't happen all that much, but frozen pipes do, and I'm going to get more claims out of it. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I certainly understand it for large townhomes that are connected or multi-family structures. You need that because that's going to save lives and save property. But as far as a single-family home, I think it's something that, frankly, Delegate Grice and I talk about it all the time. What could be changed? What could be tweaked to make this a little better for people in Cecil County?
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Well, oddly enough, I worked for a construction. I was doing a business startup. You hear okay?
Crank it up.
Crank it up.
Put it up close to your mouth.
All right.
Yell at it.
Oddly enough, I was working at I was doing a business start for a company in Middletown. Damn, did you pull on one? There we go. Oh, I see how that.
Oddly enough, I was doing a business startup for a company in Middletown when that actually came about, and it was, from what I understand or what I remember, it was specifically for residential single-family homes, and this has been a few years ago. One of the complaints that they had was that the system really was going to add a tremendous amount of cost, but the other part of that is there weren't a lot of companies that were actually installing it at that point. So that created another problem. And the things that you get with government mandates is that sometimes they're not very well thought out. They have a great idea, they push it in, they push it down on somebody, and they really don't have anything implemented in place to make it happen. Personally, I'm more on the private sector and to allow businesses to provide products and services, to allow the business to grow. And if there is a need for sprinkler systems and it's cost efficient and they can do it, then great, because like Dan said, it does save lives. But to be able to just basically mandate it and say you have to do it without having any ability or function or vehicle to make that happen is a little ridiculous because it drives costs up. So I'm not in favor of government mandates. I'm in favor of private sector driving that issue. So it created a big problem in the business and the area in which I was working in, because it really wasn't thought out, and that's a problem with government mandates, and it does drive up costs. So yeah, I would oppose that. I think that the private sector has best handled that. And the point that Dan brought up, if you have a well and the holding tank and the capacities that are needed, it created a huge expense on top of the homes that families just basically couldn't afford. So it wasn't well thought out, and I would oppose that, and I would fight for the individuals to be able to do that. Now, if you want to install it on your own and it's something that you can afford, great, that's awesome. But for government to say, you will buy this, that's not me, no.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Lewandowski?
All right. Well, as the council has discussed, obviously, if there is a state law, that's going to trump most of it. But what Mr. Hodge did was bring it up to the folks and make a stand, and that's what we would have to do. What you would hope is that the entire council will look at that and say, we know that this is going to not go through, but we're going to stand together to show that what happens or what's needed in downtown Baltimore is not what's needed in Cecil County. So as a county, we need to be a group. We're a puzzle piece in not only the state, but in the entire nation. So we need to look at it and stand together and say, if something doesn't make sense, we just can't push things through because it doesn't make sense. Now, you also, you pick your battles and you know what's going to go through and what's not. But those are the times to have the conversations with the residents there, whether it be with the press or the folks in the room, and say that this doesn't make sense for our county, and we're going to fight for it. Now, this may not be something we can change right now, but know that we're going to change it because of these reasons. So to answer your question, absolutely, I would not support those things, but I would also understand where we would be able to make the changes and how we would go about doing it. Just being a squeaky wheel is not going to change things, but it's about addressing the issues and making sure that everybody's aware, and more importantly that we're going to make changes where changes are need to be made. You can't whitewash across the entire state or the entire country. Thank you.